So digital media in galleries. Um, we've seen that galleries sort of enforce the status quo through market capitalism, by having the influence of markets and speculation and investment, sort of develop a solidification of the artists that are well known, the artists that are like up and coming, that are hyped, and they're sort of like reevaluated with like kind of like stock market with like their value increases and decreases over time. But that sort of capitalism also helps with innovation and with different approaches to artworks, as well as the more guerrilla DIY approach of artist spaces. And so I would like to quickly talk about the two approaches in which digital media is integrated into the system. And one of them is digital media as sort of a peripheral component of the ecosystem, and the other one is digital media as the integral part of the ecosystem. So, is it around the art world or is it inside the art world? What I mean by peripheral is the development of digital projects that aim at sustaining the art market more than the art world. What I mean by that is the number of products that aim at collecting, buying, and selling. I put up a couple of examples here. One that you might know is Artsy, which is a huge platform for selling artworks online. And I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a little bit more, that they made their first $1 million sale through their application. So you open the Artsy app, you go through, you find Jeff Koons, and then I should stop talking about Jeff Koons. There's the other one, the one who made the like shark. I forgot. But let's say you find the works of the guy who made the shark, and you click on like add to cart, $1 million, purchase, open PayPal, I don't know, whatever, and you buy it. So that digital media is instead of contributing to the art world itself, it sort of adapts the art world to the app economy, or it integrates it into like the greater app ecosystem. Another kind of startup that works on this is maecenas, which uses blockchain to back the authenticity or the originality of the artwork that is being purchased. So that's a problem that happens when you have it started with photography, with this idea of like reproduction that we've already mentioned a couple of weeks ago, but now it's even more complicated when you have digital pieces. So you have like a video, and the actual like thing that you're buying at the gallery is a .mp4 or a .mov. How do you make sure that .mp4, that .mov is the traditional artwork? Well, maecenas uses blockchain to make sure that this is a unique proof or unique certificate that this particular digital object is the real artwork. Whether or not it's productive to use new technologies in order to enforce old paradigms of tradition and unicity is a different discussion. And the last one is online viewing rooms. So the online viewing rooms are kind of like the virtual visits that we've mentioned for other museums before. The difference here is that now they're made by, again, Gagosians, Werner, Esther Schipper here in Berlin, where their clients can't always like fly in their private jets to come to the art gallery, and so they need to see the work. And so those online viewing rooms are basically just showrooms, and you go on their website, and they say it's not a glorified web page. I think it's a glorified web page where you have high resolution shots of the artwork. You have information about the artists, about like contemporary trends, and once you're happy with it, or if you're not happy with it, then you decide to purchase it or not to purchase it. It's interesting because both of these, the Gagosian and the one that's linked in the class notes, Esther Schipper, are still trying to like preserve sort of this feeling of exclusivity. Like if you're going to Gagosian to buy an artwork, you want to feel elite, you want to feel exclusive. And so in order to access the website, they want you to put in your name and your email address. So essentially it's just to add you to the newsletter. In practice, it has this sort of like behavior of making you feel like, oh, now I'm part of the club, I'm part of the group. And this is really what's getting traction, especially in these times of like global confinement, to make those artworks available. So if in museums, those artworks are available to educate the audience. In digital gallery, in private galleries, the artworks are made available through online viewing rooms to be sold, because it is first and foremost for them economic activity. That's peripheral media. That's what a lot of the activity in digital media for art galleries is directed at. There's another component which is integral media. And integral media is taking augmented reality and having it as an integral part of the artwork, as an artwork, right? And this is what I think is becoming more and more interesting, because it's a new medium and nobody really knows what to do with it, and it's kind of up for grabs for everybody. So on the one side, you have this example of the AR as an art installation, which was at Transmediale earlier this year in Berlin, where you would scan a QR code and then you would have an augmented reality sculpture that would show up. That was sort of like, it was a 3D representation of all the chat logs of a previous performance, because the show was about networks and sort of network art. The collective put all of those into golden letters and then made a cube out of it, and then you could walk around the cube. This is more of the traditional or canonical example of like, oh, you walk into a gallery space and then you scan it and then bam, the artwork is, the augmented reality is the artwork. Then you sort of have this sort of like what I call guerrilla art. We've looked at the first week, the very first example we looked at was the MoMR app, which was developed in New York about this guerrilla show at MoMA, where you could just put on your take the app, put it on your smartphone, and then scan different artworks in MoMA and have like new artworks of new artists or new media artists that would use the medium of augmented reality in order to be exhibited or to be displayed in canonical spaces. Another example of the guerrilla art is the vandalized Jeff Koons, in which Jeff Koons was really excited about showing the 124th version of his balloon dog, and was completely gold, and very much what the public would expect in the middle of Central Park. And there was this other artist who disagreed with the fact that Jeff Koons could put whatever he wanted wherever he wanted. And so with his team, overnight, he made another application which took the same 3D model as Jeff Koons used, but had a version that was completely graffitied over it. So it was the vandalized Jeff Koons. Is it still vandalizing if it's a digital art form? I don't think Jeff Koons was really happy about it. And then the last part is the experimentation in form. And so the links that you have in the class notes is the Adobe AR residency. And I think that's also an interesting component of it, in which we see that the technology is at the forefront of the art making process. So Adobe is this tech company that does like Photoshop, Illustrator, you guys know it. And it has now an augmented reality platform, and it has a residency, the same way that galleries or artistic spaces would have residencies for creatives and artists to come up with new ways to approach augmented reality as a medium. And so now we're sort of like leaving the DIY guerrilla art spaces that create experimentation in contemporary art. We're leaving the market capitalism that also creates experimentation in new forms of art. And we're getting into a third actor, which is the actual medium, the actual, like, the tech companies that make that. Like Apple, Android, and Adobe have they have an infrastructure, and they have hardware, they have software, and they ask artists to create works for these. And at this point, it's more research and development than actual residencies. Like, no one really quite there's no unified and sort of static language of what an AR piece is. And if they are, then perhaps they're still a little bit too basic. I always tell the story. I think I told it like at the beginning of the semester, but I really like to remember how when they invented the film camera, and they realized that you could make movies, so in early 20th century, the first thing that they did was put the movie camera static on a tripod in front of a theater play, and just like tape the whole theater play for the whole duration of the performance. And if we watch this today, we wouldn't call it cinema. We would call it like theater documentation, poor theater documentation, arguably. And it took us at least 20 years until we invented the flashback. It took 50 years. So the flashback was Citizen Kane, and then it took like 1950s when we realized that you could actually like move the camera and film the sun. That was in Rashomon. And then it took even longer. I'm not going to keep on doing math, but The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's film, was the one where they used like the Steadicam to have those like crazy traveling shots. So the language of cinema, and the cinema as an art form that we see it today, is or has been developing over half a century, right? AR has been around as an accessible means for artists for about like 5 to 6 years. And so we're still developing those languages, and we're still trying to understand what makes AR an interesting medium. So I want to conclude with those questions. And those are the questions that we're going to discuss in recitation. First of all, how is AR a new medium for artistic expression? What interests you when you see something in augmented reality? What are sort of things that you realize, oh, you can do that in AR, you can do that in anything else? And then a lot of the pieces that are sort of presented today with augmented reality always have those two words, like the immersive and interactive. AR makes things more immersive, AR makes things more interactive. And so my question to you is, do you think that every artwork is immersive? And if not, do you think that every good artwork should be immersive? And then, is every artwork interactive? Or can you just appreciate it without engaging with it? Do you have to click on a button for it to be a complete artwork? And that's going to sort of lead us into the next week, which is the one in which we're going to be doing, which we will talk about exhibiting new media art and exhibiting digital art, because everything that we've looked at so far was sort of like physical versus virtual, physical objects and augmented reality. Now we're going to have digital objects, digital artworks, and augmented reality. How do those two come in together? And so to conclude, we've seen that there is like a unique role of art galleries in contributing to experimentation in contemporary artworks. It's not so much that AR is now integrated as an informative medium, because, as we said, there is the role of the curator, there is the role of the art critic. There are people that explains narratives, but at the same time, those narratives are almost too recent to be educational. We can never have the distance, enough distance to realize how a particular artwork today enters a tradition. And so AR, if it loses its informative status, it gains an artistic status, and it becomes an artistic medium, or could become an artistic medium in its own right, which is a completely different path that we're entering, but one that we'll be thinking about for the last couple of weeks of the semester. And so the homework. The homework is going to be to finish your schedule, the retro planning that you're supposed to do for the development of your prototype, also to make progress on your prototype, and finally to think through those questions of what could make AR a specific artistic medium, and the role of immersion and the role of interactivity in artworks in general. And I'll see you guys in recitation Wednesday, and I'll see you online next week.